Girl in the Ashes. Chapter 12. Waking up is my real sweet dream. All of my actual dreams are about treks through dangerous locations. One was a volcano, the next a desert, the after that a flooded area that was still rising at a fast pace, and then finally the snow again, and we died in each one. So waking in a soft, fur bed close to a warm fireplace with Edward resting his head on the bedside seemed more than magical. To top it off, I could smell the aroma of food. I brush my fingers through Edward's soft, blonde hair. He lifts his head groggily as if asking what? I'm trying to sleep here. He perks up once he sees I'm awake. I thought you'd never wake up. How are you? He asks. My eyes close as I say, well, but I don't really know. He snaps his finger in front of my eyes which flutter open. Hey, don't go falling back asleep. Yes, you're right, I say trying to keep my eyes alert. I sit up in bed and try to pull back the sheets and blankets, but Edward sits on them. My eyebrows furrow and my lips twist to one side. Before I can complain, a young boy with dark brown hair and freckles comes into the room with a plate of freshly baked cookies and warm chicken noodle soup. It's what my nose has been going crazy over since I woke up. He stops when he sees me. Wow, you were right. She is prettier awake. Those eyes. He says to Edward. I glance at Edward, but then the boy coughs. Hello, miss. The name's X. I mark where the treasure is. I laugh, already convinced of his cuteness. Thanks, X, I see you already met. You're betrothed, Aaron. He refused to leave you and said you might panic otherwise. I smile, assuming Edward told him we were engaged. It's fine. I just didn't know he and I were taking our relationship further. I glance at Edward again. He bites his lip embarrassed, but it's at that moment I remember I kissed him and turn red myself. Thanks for the food, Edward finally says as he reaches out for the plate. I'll feed her if you don't mind. X lets him take the plate. Nice to meet you, Elena, he says before walking out of the room. I turn to Edward. Before I can lecture him, he stuffs a cookie in my mouth. Once I finish the cookie, he gives me a spoonful of the soup. When I finish that, I put my hand up. Why would you tell him that? We're supposed to be looking for your real lover girl, not creating a relationship between us. He shrugs. What does it matter? I just didn't know what to tell the kid when he asked. We could also talk about that kiss. I flinch when he asks that last question. He's not the only one who doesn't know what to say aside from a bunch of rubbish. Maybe I'm rubbing off on him. Well, you don't have to feed me, I say reaching for the plate. For once, I successfully steer the conversation in another direction. He backs the plate away. No, I have to feed you. You had to feed me, so now I'm returning the favor. What kind of favor is shoving cookies down my throat? Another cookie is placed into my mouth. I quickly grab a cookie from the plate when it's close enough and stuff it in his mouth. A smile shines through his dark eyes. We eat the cookies, and he serves me soup when the door opens again. The only thing I see that comes through the doorway is a pink head. Then the pink creature flies, yes flies, onto the bed. I realize what it is when I see its wings, beak, and unicorn horn. The mushi balances a tray with medical supplies in its beak. I know this must be for my feet. Time to see what the damage is. Edward sits back on the chair and lets the mushi pull the covers away. I help the creature, and I see my previous bandages have already been replaced once. I had no doubt those had been soaked in the snow and cold. I hold my breath. The mushi looks at me and then goes to work, carefully pulling off the bandages with its beak. I feel a sting in my feet, but it's the sight that gets me. My feet are yellow with skin peeling off. I look away from the mess of popped blisters. At least I still have toes, but how will I wear glass slippers to the next ball? Not that there's going to be another ball, and after that kiss, I might as well tell Edward the truth. I could have avoided this trip if I had been straightforward initially, but I wanted to get away. I wanted him all to myself. The mushi finished its work efficiently despite its lack of hands. I relax and thank the creature. It nods and makes a cute chirping sound before flying off the bed and walking out the door. After the mushi leaves, X comes back in. Well, do you still want to leave today? The horses are ready. I really would like you to stay longer. I loved hearing your stories, Aaron. And Elena, you're just so, what's the word you used? X blabbers on, looking at Edward. Captivating, Edward says. I look between the boys. Captivating? Oh dear, I can't take any more of this. Can I stand now? Edward moves his chair out of the way so I can get out of bed. I lean on the mattress for a while, then put full force on my feet. It doesn't hurt as bad as I thought, but it stings nonetheless. X grabs my boots and socks from off the floor and hands them to Edward. Don't forget these. I sit back down, ready to put them on. Instead, Edward unties the laces and gently puts my socks on. I study his face and wonder how I got a prince to kneel before me. He catches me staring when he glances up. How's that? Not too tight, I hope. His voice is soft and I can only nod in response as I desperately try not to gaze at his lips. X twiddles his thumbs. You two should get going. My papa is due in a while. He'll probably charge you more for the food along with the horse. Exactly. We can't underpay you. I say standing. Edward balances me out when I do since my footing is still iffy. But you're nice people. He protests, I want to help. I step over to him and kneel. Thank you, I say before I kiss him on the cheek. He blushes and nods, then waves a hand politely to the doorway. Edward takes a hold of me to help me walk out of the room. It's now that I realize I have the heavy coat. I don't bother saying anything, but I'll make him wear it later today. X follows us into the kitchen and dining room where the front door is located. In the room is a family of mushi. They chirp at us and wave their wings. I wave back, a little overwhelmed. Father told me they were almost extinct and here's this house with 11 of them. We make our way to the front door, watching the mushi fly around making cookies and soup. I assume they are making it for X's father for dinner, but I am surprised to see the morning sunlight from the windows. X continues to follow us until we get to the horses. Snowman happily greets the cream-colored mare. Edward and I thank X. The young boy beams. You are welcome. I hope you have a safe trip. Edward and I laugh and wish him farewell. Edward helps me up on the cream mare before he mounts Snowman. After we're settled, we head out into the snow. This trip will be much quicker. According to Edward, we should be in Avani by midday. While we ride, the pain in my feet lessens and I wonder if the mushi added ointment to make the blisters heal faster. I glance at Edward, and various questions pop into my mind. What did Edward tell X? Did he really call me captivating and pretty? Does he know? Or does he think I'm beautiful without knowing at all? As we near a charming little farm, I get the guts to ask, so, you called me captivating, huh? I raise my brow to appear more curious so he wouldn't be shy about telling the truth. He comes off shy anyway. I certainly meant it when I said it and I do now. You don't realize how lovely you've become. To be honest, you were always quite the eye-catcher. I laugh. I think that was because I climbed trees and ran around like a wild horse. Another laugh escapes my lips as I turn to his intent gaze. You don't see it, do you? I look at the snow-covered field. I just see a girl who will never be considered a lady. To add to that, a servant with no parents. I've never been known as the prettiest girl, except to my father and mother who are required to think that. It's always Tessa. And she is stunning and she can pass for a true lady. Clara had more attention than me too before I was a servant. I think that's because you stopped going to events where the public could see you. Those who have seen you are blown away. Our first meeting as Elena and Aaron wasn't all an act, you know. He pauses. How come you were never courted? I would have thought you and your sisters would have been married by now. My eyebrows rise in astonishment. I would have thought that would be easy to figure out. None of the girls would dare endure that kind of horrid situation. It is an unwritten rule for all the mothers to keep their daughters available until you, Prince Charming, get married. Everyone was waiting all this time? It still seems unrealistic that you or your sisters haven't considered marriage. Again, they are waiting until you get married. And to be clear, Tessa thinks she's the runner-up after this princess of yours. By the way, I heard for a while there that you weren't at social functions either. Why is that? Snowman's pace slows. I was terrified of showing my face. Aaron became my servant specifically to act as a decoy. I swallow. You mean, you've had death threats? A bit more than threats. I can't keep track of the times poison has crossed the royal family's table. He grins half-heartedly. We're nearly there. I can't wait to weed out my queen. It is tough to let the dark topic slip without further acknowledgement, but I let it go. Your queen? Is it really that strong of a bond? Edward's about to reply when, over the hill, we catch our first glimpse of the castle of Avani. The castle is perched next to giant mountains and rests on a small peak. Houses line the valley and trail up to the castle walls. This is where I find out if she is my bride-to-be, he says with a wide grin like never before. My gut twists because I know he won't find anything on her because I am her. With a high yell, he kicks his horse forward. I follow after him slowly until he shouts out what a turtle I am. He'll regret saying that as my horse gains speed. I don't think my horse likes losing a race either because we overshoot past the goal where the kingdom begins. Villagers look upon us as if we're loony. Edward and his horse come behind, and a cheerful smirk crosses his face. I guess he won at pushing my buttons, the stinker. Come on, let's find the Hall of Records. Where do you think it is? He asks. I was hoping he already knew, but I guess that's one reason he brought me. That leaves me to decide where it might be. I point over to the church. I believe it's in Avani Cathedral. He nods, setting his horse on the pathway to the cathedral. We move slowly because of the wandering villagers and stray cats and dogs. We finally reach the large, ornate, and stone building and hear the singing from inside. Edward jumps off his horse with no problem. I, on the other hand, ache and am not so energetic. Clicking his tongue, Edward puts both hands out like I'm a child jumping into their father's arms. As much as I'd rather not have his help for several reasons, I let him gently bring me down to the safe ground. Thank you, I say, peering down at my boots. I then look back up, remembering I'm thanking him and not my shoes. This is, of course, a mistake since he's still close and holding my waist. He stares for what seems like an eternity, before smoothly saying, I'm not done yet, still have to keep you upright. He winks and drapes an arm on my shoulder. I roll my eyes since all that does is make us look like a couple. That's probably his play, or he thinks I'm going to tip over. We soundlessly walk into the building, which leads into a massive assembly hall. In the way back, there is a choir rehearsing, and behind them is a statue of a young woman with a dove perched on her finger. The woman is a representation of the creator. A similar statue exists in Amishi, but instead of a dove, ours features a doe at her feet. There is no one in our immediate area, but off to the side, there's a gigantic sign showing us exactly where the Hall of Records begins. I look down the never-ending hallway with shelves on one side and stained glass on the other. Thankfully, it looks like they put the old records at the back and the living in the front. Edward rolls his shoulders. Let the search begin. We hunt for the records of the children born around Edward's time. I pull out the ones who are barely old enough to be considered a bride since they are the ones I find first. Edward looks over my shoulder as I unroll the paper. We skip many names which are the boys born at this time on the scroll. Edward glances at each of the girls' names. By some miracle, he can put each name with a face, at least those who are marked as nobility. I put the scroll away, then pick up the next one. There are a few in this one he doesn't know for sure, but just by reading the names he's certain none of them are the mysterious noblewoman. We continue this until we get to the scroll that holds my name and Clara's. He looks over this one with the most care. I breathe in when I see my name. When Edward's eyes pass over it, he stops reading to stare at it. I think it's just my imagination, but then he rolls it back up. That's it for today, Edward declares, glancing at the fading light out the tall windows. Wait, really? It's only been 40 minutes? He nods, returning the scroll to the shelf. Then he offers me his arm. I don't know what else to do, so I loop my arm through his. We are silent until we leave the cathedral. If we want a place to stay, my father liked the Meaty Inn, I suggest. It serves lots of chicken and beef. Apparently, the owner has a passion for a hearty meal. And get this, his name is Frog. Works for me, Edward says, kicking a rock. We claim Snowman and the cream mare before we stroll towards the Meaty Inn. We pay to keep the horses in the inn stables before going inside. Upon entering, we are blasted with cheerful hoots, claps, and fiddle music. In the middle of the room, people dance. It's certainly not an elegant dance as they stomp their feet to the beat, shaking the floorboards. We head to the back where a man sits eating turkey behind a bar table. He looks up at us as we approach and puts down a turkey wing. Hello, dear customers. I'm terribly sorry, but we don't have any rooms left if that's what you're after. A wedding party booked the whole place. It is lively in here. But, there's really nothing? My father, Charles, said this place always found a way to accommodate travelers. Frog smiles. His white teeth brilliant against his dark skin. Ah yes, the traveling merchant. He always brought me the best meat from various kingdoms. Does that mean you have some for me too? I won't make room for you for free, you know. I can't run a successful business that way. We don't have anything like that, but I have more than enough coins, Edward says. Frog laughs heavily. No, I'll only take meat as a form of payment. A tall, beautiful woman with dark curly hair comes up behind Frog. "Oh, don't worry about my husband. He's just pulling your leg about the payment. However, he is right about the rooms. The only one we have left is a recent expansion. As such, it doesn't have any furniture." "That's fine. We just don't want to sleep out in the cold," Edward says, smiling at the woman while offering her some coins. "All right, dears. You enjoy yourselves out here while I get some blankets and pillows for you." She heads off without another word. We look back at Frog, but he's fast asleep next to his plate of food. We walk around the room and find a table. "Wanna dance?" Edward asks not long after we sit down. Before I can answer, he winces. "Wait, no, your feet." I look over at him surprised. Not because he asked when my feet hurt, but because he asked at all. "You want to dance with me?" "Yes, but forget about it. You should rest." Silence sits between us, and I don't like it. I slip off my poor excuse for gloves and stuff them into the coat's pocket, which I had taken off and rested on the chair's backrest. I stand and dip into a curtsy in front of him. Edward tilts his head before taking off his gloves and coat. He holds out his hand to me. I'm afraid to take it, but I do. My stomach lifts when our bare skin touches. I feel free, yet I'm held captive. He stares suddenly into my eyes, searching for answers in them. "Are you sure?" I nod. I know it looked bad this morning, but my feet can take it. "Okay, but tell me if it hurts." I laugh. "What do you take me for? A baby?" "No, you're stubborn." He retorts with a frown. I lead him through most of the steps since he has no clue what he's doing. Once he catches on, his eyes focus on me. I avoid his gaze, glancing around at everyone else. My gut wants to confess and release my guilt. But his gaze drops as he probably concludes that I look nothing like the princess he wants to marry. Frog's wife finds us in the crowd and informs us our room is ready. After grabbing our things, we follow her to the room. The room is empty as she said, but it does have pillows, blankets, a lit fireplace, and some cooked chicken for us to eat. She leaves, and we eat the meal. Then I set up a nice makeshift bed for Edward from the blankets. He stops me when he sees what I'm doing. "Stop being a servant for a moment, please." He takes a blanket and lays it down on the ground next to the fireplace. After that comes the pillow and another blanket on top. I sit down on the place he set for me and slowly take off my boots. I unwrap the bandages only to find my feet have completely healed. Edward blinks and slams down on his pile of blankets, letting out an exasperated sigh. You sly kid. He must have given you an expensive ointment. I'll have to send him some coins to cover the costs once we get back." I say nothing, putting my boots aside and getting under one of the blankets. My knees are tucked close to my chest while my thoughts swirl. "Can I ask you something?" I whisper as if those dancing downstairs can hear us if I talk too loudly. "Why did you call me princess that night in the kitchen?" He blushes as if the topic is embarrassing. "I guess I thought it would comfort you. I remember your father calling you princess, so I did." I rest my head on my knees, staring into the fire beside me. I miss him so much. He should have let me come with him on his trips. I could have looked after his health, but I know I can't blame myself. "No, you can't," he states before sitting up with one knee bent while the other is extended. Then he whispers my name so softly that I'm caught off guard by the affection behind it. Then he repeats the question I never answered. "Why did you kiss me?" My heart crushes me, and I can't lie to him any longer. "Ed, I need to tell you something."